Commissioner, right? This could be fun. What would you like me to ask? And I think this is a very important question, and one probably felt by a lot of Americans. We've talked this morning about the trust deficit that exists between the Internal Revenue Service and Americans, particularly in light of what I will term as much more egregious than maybe we've heard from my colleagues on the other side of the aisle this morning, the abuse of the code to attack people based on ideology. And we're going to continue to investigate not only your investigations you have internally, sir, but here within Congress, serious investigations, and people need to be held accountable more so than they have been. But that being said, John, a CPA in my district, asked that makes the point that he's a CPA and the tax code is very difficult to navigate. I think we would all agree with that. 4 million words, 10,000 pages. How can the IRS make it easier for qualified preparers and regular taxpayers to efficiently manage their taxes and provide quality service with the threat, without the threat of onerous penalties for unintentional oversights or misinterpretations or unintentional errors? And additionally, how can there be less of an adversarial relationship between the professionals and the IRS when dealing with problem taxpayers as well? Absent new dollars, because it's not just a function of money, how can you operate the IRS in a different way to improve that relationship, which, as you can imagine, for even a CPA or a regular hardworking American who has to pay their taxes, it's a nightmare trying to figure out how to sort through all this. Many of us in this country, I think on both sides of the aisle, believe we need tax reform, and I'd like your comments on that, sir.
Well, as I told the chairman earlier, I strongly believe in tax simplification, tax reform to make it easier for people to figure how much they owe. I mean, most Americans just, if you could tell them what they owe, are happy to pay it, or not overly happy, but willing to pay it. But when you impose all sorts of complexity and make it difficult, they get a little less happy. We have I think, an important partnership with preparers and those who are qualified. We're always concerned about unregulated preparers on around the periphery who sometimes engage in fraud, sometimes are educated and really don't provide good service. But for people like your constituent, we have a lot of programs trying to reach out to preparers, trying to provide them as much information as we can. I would hope that as we make the website more user-friendly, it used to be clunky in the extreme. And we're spending some of our resources there because we do think it's important for taxpayer service. But we value the work that preparers do. As I say, they're our outreach to clients. If we can have them comfortable that they understand the intricacies of the tax code, it'll make it easier for their clients. One of the things we have a special tax preparer line you can call. One of our concerns there is even there, the resource constraints have made people, we've heard from preparers that they have to sit on the line longer. And I don't think that's fair to them. I mean, they've got businesses to run. If they have to wait half an hour, 45 minutes to get there on the special line, if they've got 5 or 6 clients, I mean, they could waste a significant amount of time. So all I can say is we value the preparer community. We'll continue to reach out to them. Best thing we can do for them is to try to provide them as much information as guidance as we can, and we'll keep doing that.
And sir, it's also a function of style. And as you know, they take their cues from the person leading the organization. And so efforts that you can make to ensure that the relationships are less adversarial and more supportive. I think we see this at all levels of the federal government, where Americans feel that these federal agencies are not there to work with them, but rather to work against them.
Right.
And this is a common problem at every agency, and I hope that you'll do your best to try to fix those problems at the IRS.
Right. Well, one of the advantages of this tour I'm on is I do get to talk to people doing the work. And as I say, in Philadelphia, I had a very nice and a very productive meeting with a half a dozen revenue agents and revenue officers. And that's where I got the willing to pay, unwilling to pay distinction. And their point, these are revenue officers you think are sort of banging on your door to collect, who are saying, we need to make sure that if you're willing to pay and you just have difficulties, that we work with you, that we don't actually make you feel uncomfortable. And in fact, their concern is the biggest problem they have is a lot of times people don't respond to notices from the IRS because they're very nervous about it and concerned. And their point was we ought to have a way of making sure people understand that if you're just having trouble paying your taxes, we're going to try to work with you. The people we don't like are the people who, in fact, are consciously trying to avoid paying taxes, trying to hide their assets, moving around the country, engaged in fraud. Those people, we don't have to be very nice to. But I think the point is well taken. If there's an honest mistake made, if people didn't understand things, they're trying to pay, we ought to have a productive working relationship with them.
And then, if I might, just Chairman, one real quick budgetary question. Mr. Amade asked this question earlier in a different way, but I'd like to know, and maybe you could just follow up with information for the committee, how many hours and how many dollars have been spent related to the controversy created by the investigation related to 501c4 groups last year, and the reforms or the changes that you're looking at now. And I know you said it was less than 1% of your budget. If you could let us know the impact. I know this is prior to your time there, but these things do have an impact on time that could be spent elsewhere, number one. And then number two, how much money has been spent, and how much are you needing and requesting related to the enforcement of the Affordable Care Act, and the impact that's having on your agency? I know several years ago and throughout their hearings, the IRS has repeatedly asked for hundreds of millions of more dollars to hire more agents to go out to make sure that small businesses and Americans are following the new big government mandates on them regarding this law. And I'd like to know the cost to the IRS and the and where you're funding those resources.
Yeah, I can answer that question because it is a question I've been asking, and that is the 2014 presidential budget for the IRS proposed $440 million for the Affordable Care Act. $330 million of that was for information technology. None of that funding was provided, so we are actually, one of the constraints we have is we have to pay for the IT, particularly out of other IT projects we otherwise would have funded as we go forward. The $100 million is primarily for preparing for and dealing with information issues, designing of the systems, making sure that they work. It is, as you can imagine, one of the reasons it's my priority is I am committed that we will at this time next year have an effective filing season, which means we will be effectively implementing our responsibilities under the Affordable Care Act. We did that at the front end. The rollout difficulties were not IRS difficulties. It's a major challenge, and we're finding the funds. It's one of the things that we have to then find in other areas of the IRS.
Just a clarification point, Mr. Chairman. So the amount requested was $440. How much does the IRS spend annually and on the implementation of the Affordable Care Act, and how much does it project to spend in the next years?
I can get you that in terms of what we've spent for the last couple of years, what we're spending this year, and what our estimate is for next year. Obviously, one of the issues that's going to happen to us, as I've talked to people about, is that starting late in the fall, but certainly during filing season next year, because it's a new requirement, we're going to have a lot of inquiries from preparers as well as taxpayers if they are in the area of being eligible for a premium tax credit, and even if they aren't, making sure they are comfortable filling out that return. And we've started that public information campaign this week. We'll spend all the rest of this year trying to, again, get preparers and taxpayers comfortable that they understand. Now, 70 or 80% of the taxpayers aren't going to have anything to do with it at all. They're just going to check a box, say, I've got insurance, and they'll move on their way. So a big chunk of people won't be affected by it. But we'll get you, be delighted to get you and the committee the information about, over the last 2 or 3 years, how much have we spent for IT or personnel on affordable care, what are we spending this year, and what do we expect the requirements are going to be in the next year or two.
I'm sure that when you next appear before us, then there'll be a lot of discussion about the dollars that are necessary. Thank you. Ms. Hura Butler.
I wanted to ask about bonuses really quickly. We had, in making sure that bonuses are being given to employees who actually have shown improved performance or goals that they've met. Did you, I don't know if you've seen, have you taken, we put some report language together. Have you taken our guidance within the House report language to ensure the bonuses would be awarded to those who actually show improved employee performance and productivity?
Yes, there are performance awards. The pool is 1% of compensation. The performance judgments are made by managers, not by the employees themselves, obviously. And the history is that those awards have gone to about 2/3 of the employees, so 1/3 don't get any. The average size of those awards is about $1,200, so nobody's making a lot of money. And if I could hold her time, if I could respond to the 1%, in terms of how did I come to this decision. After the decision was made last year trying to reach the sequester levels that performance awards would not be paid to IRS employees, OMB had issued an government-wide edict that 1% performance awards could be made. My predecessor decided that while the contract provided with the bargaining unit performance awards, a pool of 1.75%, that we thought negotiating ability to change that number, and the number went to 0. The union then, understandably, filed a grievance, an unfair labor practice, and a lawsuit, all of which were pending when I started. In the course of negotiating a new agreement, which we're in the process of, and I hope sometime in the near future we'll have that agreement settled, we've been negotiating about what the performance pool ought to be going forward.
When you say the performance pool, what does that mean?
That means
like the number of people that are eligible?
The bargaining unit is whatever thousands of employees it is, and you take the salary, and then the question is, what is the performance award pool? It doesn't go to every employee. And
so wait a minute, these aren't merit-based employees?
These are performance awards based on merit. They're determined by the manager, but the size of the pool available for awards was set by the contract at 1.75%.
So that meant that's a floor. That many will get a performance award?
No, 1.75% was the pool. Then each individual bargaining unit was evaluated, a judgment was made, and as I say, about 2/3 of them were eligible for awards, performance awards. The average award was about $1,200. 1/3 of them were not eligible because they had not performed, determined by their manager. And the question is, what's the size of the pool, or whether there would be a pool at all? The decision was no pool. We ultimately negotiated a settlement with the union that they would drop the grievance, the unfair labor practice, and they would drop the lawsuit, and we would pay not 1.75 into a pool for performance awards, but 1%. In terms of how we are able to do that, we had in our budget, post-sequester, funding for that, because as a result of the sequester, we've actually lost another 1,300 people, and on an annualized basis, that provides us part of the revenues we need. We've made more assumptions about cuts in our other overhead expenses of about 4%. And the arrangement with the union is that we won't pay those awards in the fiscal year the way we've always done it. We pay managers 2 or 3 months after the fiscal year into the next one. So we're moving the bargaining unit awards into the next fiscal year. So this year we are only going to pay 1 pool award. There won't be 2, and that's how it fits within the budget. So we had...
So can I really quickly, reclaiming my time, I
was going to give you back 2 minutes if it was the chairman's approval.
What I'm interested in understanding is not what I think. If someone's eligible for an award because they've shown, based on their merit and their hard work, that they deserve it, I'm fine with that.
Good.
My issue is understanding. You said that the managers make the decision. So I assume you've issued guidance whereby they can use, some kind of criteria to make this.
Yes,
and
there are,
and
there's an agency-wide performance plan run by the Human Capital Office.
And then there's a follow-up for quality control to make sure that it's not a manager saying, right, so that people have actually met these awards, because we've seen people receive these performance awards who, for crying out loud, are the subject of investigations. So I guess I want to make sure that moving forward, that these awards are appropriate. That's where my question is.
I've asked that question myself to make sure that for managers as well as bargaining unit employees, when we pay a performance award, we need to be comfortable that the system is actually rewarding performance. Mm-hmm. Employees know who's performing and who's not, and if you're making awards to people who aren't performing, that's not good for morale either. So we have a very sophisticated system, and I think your point is well taken that we need to, and I've said the same thing, we need to evaluate it to make sure that we're comfortable that this just is Lake Wobegon and everybody's above average, that basically we need to be rewarding performance. Mm-hmm. And that's my final reason for making this decision. We could do it within the budget, and these are, again, employees who haven't had a pay raise in 4 years. I've been subject to a lot of difficulties over the last year. And ultimately, as I say, 75% of our budget is people. Without the people, the work isn't going to get done. Part of the reason I'm out wandering around the country in the middle of the wintertime is to remind those employees who are dedicated to the mission that we value their work. They are terrifically dedicated. Some of them have been around 20, 25, 30 years working on this area. And their only concern is, can we get them the resources so they could provide better taxpayer service? So if in the course of settling with the union and saving us the risk of having to pay more in that pool and being able to time it in a different way, I can send a signal to the employees that we value their work. It seemed to me that was appropriate.
All right. with that, I yield back.
Anybody have any other questions? I think we're about ready to move into panel 2. So let me just say to you, Commissioner, thank you. I know how busy you are. Thank you for being here today. And we know what a difficult job you have. And I think sometimes we lose sight of the good things that the IRS does, that you do every day under difficult circumstances. So collecting the revenues, talking to folks, answering questions, chasing down the bad guys, all the things that you do every day, we very much appreciate. And we're here to help you do that even better. So thank you for the time. This concludes the first panel, and we'll have the second panel come along. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, let me